Okay, so in today's video, I'm going to show you how to paint the Mars style bases that I do on my Legio Vulturum. So I'm not going to go through the process of how I made the bases. There's tons of tutorials out there on YouTube land where I just use cork and a little bit of sand. So I lay down some layers of cork on top of the base, and I also glue some sand on there and kind of make a rocky, crumbly base. And you can kind of see how I did that here. It's not a tutorial on how to make the base. I'm assuming you're going to go, if you have questions on that, I'm assuming you're going to go check that out on YouTube on how to make it. So basically, I've started painting a Lancer that I'm going to use as allied knight house to my Malinax, as House Malinax allied to my Vulturum, and the process is the same. I'm just going to do the standard Mars base that I've done on all of my Legio Vulturum on these Malinax knight bases. So here's how we're going to do that. It's actually really quite simple, and I've laid out the colors here that I use. The first color is corn red. Get yourself a good bottle of that. Then I use I paint the entire base corn red. Then I dry brush with a mix of Troll Slayer orange and Rise of Dust. That actually kind of thickens the paint a little bit, but it's basically the same color, but it thickens it. I do a nice heavy dry brush of that. Then on some of the edges, I do a dry brush of Ushtabi bone. And then I make a 50-50 mix of Reichland Flesh Shade and Lamian Medium, and then I wash some of the recesses and kind of wash on the base. But let me show you how you do this. The first thing I'm going to, and I'm not going to make you watch me do every paint stroke here, but I'll speed it up in some parts. But the first thing to do is we're going to get a nice solid layer of corn red on the entire base. So nice solid thick coat, not thick coat, but a good coverage, and this paint covers actually quite well. So solid coverage. Don't dry brush this. You're getting every little piece here. You're getting the entire base painted this color. Every nook and cranny. Really get in there. I prime black, and I painted. I did some dry brushing of this. The lead belcher on here after a couple shades of Nuln Oil to kind of get that look. But I'm not going to spare this base. I'm not going to try to keep any of the black in there. I paint the edges because I also don't like to see paint ridges of dried paint on there, so that's kind of why I do that. But your mileage may vary. But yeah, we're just going to cover this entire base. It's kind of interesting trying to do this over the camera. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. But yeah, just getting a nice solid color here. Getting it all in there. Being very careful around the toes. And if you miss a spot around the toes, it's not going to be the end of the world. But try not to get any of the red paint on. I really glopped on the paint there. You can kind of tell. I don't really care. I'm going to kind of vigorously brush all of that in. Get a nice solid coat. I'm going to finish painting this up. We're going to go on, then let it dry, and we'll go on to the next step. Okay, so we've got the corn red all over the base, nice and good and dry. Let it dry very thoroughly before I start the next step. So we're ready to go to the next step. A couple things here. I'm going to use them, like I said earlier, I'm going to use a mix of Troll Slayer Orange and Ryza Rust. Make sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. I don't really have a real set way of doing this, but I tend to try to do a mix of the two, and I just kind of play it a little bit by ear. So I'm going to pop both of these open, and I don't use a typical dry brush. What I have a secret weapon, and these are eye makeup brushes. You can find these in the makeup aisle in your drugstore, or I got these off of Amazon. But really, it's a really kind of big roundish brush, and it's really flat and soft, and it's fantastic for dry brushing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a very heavy dry brush. So I'm going to get a little bit of the Troll Slayer on there, and then I'll dip in a little bit of the Rise of Rust. That just kind of makes it thicker, and it coats really well. And so I'm going to try to get most of that off, but it's going to be a pretty heavy dry brush. It's not going to be a normal dry brush. You're going to be okay with getting a lot of paint on there. So I'm just going to come in here, and I'm going to really work that dry brush into the base. And honestly, I don't have enough paint on there, so I'm going to come in here and get some more. That should be coming up pretty solid orange if I'm doing it right. So okay, that's a little bit better. Yep, there we go. So you don't be shy, really get in there and get that rust on there. I'm not trying to cover all of the corn red, but the corn red should just be kind of really in the crevices. It should be the background color. I'm just going to really kind of get in there with this brush and try to hit all of the raised areas pretty thoroughly. Again, very heavy dry brush. Don't be shy. Get in there and kind of get a good covering. Hopefully you can see that, but I'm just kind of getting in there using all the bristles. And sometimes on these knights, like with a warhound or a warlord or a reaver, I can usually kind of get in between the toes and not really worry about getting too much on the feet. This guy might be a little bit of a different story. We'll see how far we get. But yeah, just kind of keep working around all the edges. And this is there we go. We're really getting a good look now. I don't know if you can tell that on the video, but use more Rise of Rust. I think my mix is a little bit thin between the Troll Slayer and the Ryza, but you really want to get that color on there. So I'm just going to keep going around. But I was just saying, the way I construct these bases, I try to make a lot of these edges where I can get a lot of kind of dry brush hits. You know, the relief, you're really looking for that relief between the edges so that you can really kind of get a lot of color on there and a lot of color variation. So again, just keep dry brushing around. You'll know when you've got a good, I got a little bit of paint on there. You'll know when you've got enough on there. It'll look something like this, but all kind of all over. So again, don't have to be too persnickety getting every single surface. You do want a little bit of that red coming through as a base, but don't be shy getting this stuff on there all around those edges. Okay, all right, so give yourself some time to kind of get this on. Let this dry thoroughly before going on to the next step, but do get a nice heavy dry brush all around on that bad boy. Okay, so you've got your Rise of Rust and Troll Slayer Orange dry brush done at this point. So you should look something like this. You've got some areas that are still kind of red underneath, but it's pretty orange at this point. So the next step is we're going to take Ustabi bone layer, going to give that a good shake. Now we're going to be very careful with this. The last one was very liberal with its application. This one we're going to be very conservative. So again, get your makeup brush, dry brush, or whatever. You don't have to have a makeup brush. I just find that these work really, really well. But get your handy dandy dry brush. Get the paint loaded on there. We're going to treat this much like a very standard dry brushing step. Don't overload the brush. Get it nice and dry. Get your dry brush ready. And so now what we're going to do is we're just going to hit the edges of some of the higher raised edges, right? So we're just going to kind of come in here, hit that leading edge a little bit, not all over the place, just on that edge. Here's another good edge, like the sharper edges, kind of a roundabout. Hit some of those sharper edges a little bit. This is all going to come together later when we do a wash. But these edges, like that's a good one right there. I mean, even that I got maybe a little bit heavy, but that's not a big deal. It's all going to come together with the wash. So just kind of come in here with your dry brush, just like you would normally. Hit a couple of those raised edges. Don't be too liberal with this. Like don't do it necessarily everywhere. And don't do it just on the edges. Maybe do a couple flat surfaces. But, hit a couple areas, but, leave most of that orange. Okay, just kind of hit it there, hit it here, here, and there. And I think that looks pretty good. So let this, now it's really important. Let this, that's good enough, I think. You know, maybe just a little bit more there or something. I don't know. But just hit it in spots. Hit it particularly where there's sharper edges, and let it dry. It's really important that you let this dry before you put the wash on, because if it starts kind of leaking, or if this white paint is still a little bit wet, you're going to get like these smears of paint, and it's going to look awful. So give this a good 10-15 minutes to dry, and then we'll come back and do the final step. Okay, the next and final step is to provide kind of a targeted wash, and it's a diluted wash. So what I do is to kind of get a little bit more shade in the crevices and kind of pull all the different colors together, is I do a 50-50 mix of Reichland Flesh Shade and Lamian Medium to kind of keep it nice and flat and to kind of thin out the color. So using this color straight out of the pot I find is maybe a little bit strong. So I'm just going to mix kind of 50-50 mix it. You don't need a lot of this because you're only going to cover a base worth of stuff. So maybe I might even be putting too much in there, but what the heck. Make sure that we got plenty there. So get some Reichland Flesh Shade, and then however you choose to mix a little bit of Lamian Medium in there with it. Let's call that a reasonable 50-50. Give that a mix. All right. And then, excuse the creaky chair. And then on the miniature, you're going to wash the entire base for the most part, but feather it out where you don't need it. But really where you want to get it, you want to get this in some of the cracks, right? In particular. So kind of get it in there. Go over some of those white spots that you already dry brushed, kind of the very highest highlights. Kind of get it in there. Targeted, get it into places where there should be shadow, like at the base of the like the different levels there, kind of near the feet, underneath some of those overhangs. Don't necessarily get it all over the base, but if you are going to do stuff like that, you can kind of do that and then clean off your brush, feather it out a little bit so that the wash kind of fades over the distance that you don't want it, don't want it covering. So just kind of do some targeted washes, particularly in the creases. Oh, see, there's a good crease to kind of get into right there. Right there, we got all that. Let's do over here a little bit. And we're going to let that dry real nice. Maybe right in there. A little bit over that white spot that we put there. All right. So get it into those crevices and let that dry. And here we are, the completed base. So kind of give you a good look here. This is, I painted the rim of the base black like I always do, but that's really the process. It's pretty straightforward. I think it turns out pretty good looking. Hope you like it too. If not, suggestions or feedback on how to improve is always appreciated. But yeah, that's my Mars basing process. So thanks for watching, and see you next time.